Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast. And as we draw to a close on 2024, I wanted to use today's episode to create a little bit of a compilation of all of the amazing people who we have had on the show this year. We have heard from such a broad range of people, from product-based business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, thought leaders, and so many amazing people have shared their journey, their stories, and answered on the spot many of our really good conversation questions. But at the end of every episode, I ask people the same question, which is, if you could ask any person, dead or alive, a question, who would it be and what would you ask them? So this episode is going to share a snippet of all of the different answers we have had on the show. And hopefully it sparks some interesting ideas in your mind as you listen. But also I want to ask you to consider, who would you reply to this question? And when you next see a friend or family member, perhaps you could ask this question and start a conversation with them. So a big thank you to everyone who has listened along with us this year, and I'm looking forward to sharing some more amazing people in 2025. Thank you. And the finishing question that I like to ask all of our guests is, if you could ask any person, dead or alive, a question, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Okay, something I would love to ask and get a definitive answer on. I would like to ask Steve Jobs why the Apple logo, the real reason why it has a bite out of it, because there's so many theories, and even like the designer of it has been wishy-washy about it, and there's like 3 or 4 common things. And I'm a real design geek. Like when I was at school, I studied graphic design. I had a fantastic teacher who got me like really interested in like the Bauhaus movement and all of that. And there's like loads of links between that and Steve Jobs and Apple. And it's always bugged me. It's like, I don't know, and no one will ever know the real reason. So yeah.
I would ask my father, who died 14 years ago. I would ask my father, Dad, if you could turn back time, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I thought that was a really good question. So mine would be Mahatma Gandhi, because in its fast-paced digital world where people are more connected yet more divided actually than ever, I thought his principles of non-violence, truth, peaceful resistance, uniting people, inspiring, lasting societal change. I wonder what he would make of it all. And I'd love to hear his views on where we've gone perhaps a bit wrong.
Probably the person that's like impacted my life in such a huge way is the author Margaret Atwood. She's incredible. I read her first when I was 15 at school. We did The Handmaid's Tale, which was a bold choice from my A-level English teacher to stick that one on our curriculum in a girls' school with a load of us raging hormones. But I mean, it definitely turned me on to the idea of feminism and the fact we really had to fight for something, and still are. And I'd probably ask her, is she ever terrified by the way she manages to tell the future? Because she's a dystopian writer, but terrifyingly, things she wrote in the 80s and the 90s are hurtling towards becoming true. And yeah, I have met her, but I'd love to have a proper sit down chat with her about just the way she views the world, because it's quite incredible.
It would be my granny. Like, I would want to ask her any question, and it would just be any question. It could be anything. It could be, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite flavor ice cream? What's your best memory from your life? It could honestly be anything. It doesn't have to be that deep, but just to have the opportunity to just speak to her and have her respond again would be everything.
For me, there's only one obvious answer to this, and I feel like you must have had it before, which is Jesus. I would have to ask Jesus, when are you coming back? I'm not even necessarily religious, but I just think of all the figures in history. Obviously, I went down the dead path rather than the alive path, but I would have to ask Jesus, when are you coming back? Or maybe he's already back, who knows?
Since I saw that question, when you sent it to me, I have been pondering who this person would be. And it's been very hard for me to find that person. I think probably because the question I would like to ask a person who has succeeded and done so despite huge challenges, I think the question would be, how did you get through the tough times? And, there are people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Beethoven and Mozart, people that have really left their mark in the world. I think that's what I'd like to ask any of those people who were very, very gifted, but who obviously had a lot of challenges. I'd just like to say to them, how did you get through the tough times? Because I think we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us as a species. And, people that are trying to make a difference in the world, like you and like me, sometimes we think to ourselves, and I'm not, trying to compare myself to those great people, but I think if you're trying to make a difference in the world, you do come up with challenges. And so I'd just like to say to them, what do you have a bit of advice about how to get through those tough times?
So I think this question I would answer differently every day. But I guess my first thought is Nelson Mandela. And I would probably ask something about about overcoming adversity and then taking that to leading with resilience, and kind of what advice he would offer to someone in a position who's trying to balance life. And that's who I would love to have a chat with.
Look, I was thinking about this, and there's so many inspirational people that I would want to ask questions of. But ultimately, I would want to choose one of my 3 grandparents, because they raised me essentially. I miss them every single day. I love them dearly. And one of my big regrets in life is that we didn't have smartphones when they were alive. And I'd want to have a conversation with them and pull my smartphone out and just ask them, pepper them with so many questions about their life, and record it so that I can watch back. So, for example, my grandma during the war ran a cafe, and by running that cafe, she was able to pay for the house that they bought. My nana fled from Hong Kong, so she's part Chinese when when Japan invaded. And I just have so many questions, when you arrived in Australia, how? Like, there's so many things that I know, but that I don't know, that I would just want more details. To be honest, though, if I was to meet with them, I probably would just not ask them any questions and just give them a big hug, and it would be a waste. So they would be who I would choose.
Well, I feel like this might be resolved soon, but I would definitely nip myself onto the cast of Gavin and Stacey and ask Bryn what happened on the fishing trip.
Jack Black. I would approach Jack Black, and can I ask him 2 questions? Well, the first question would be, play me the greatest song in the world, or play me the best song in the world. I'd ask him that, and then I would secondly say, can you please come over for dinner, because my wife really likes you. He's a cool guy. Like, he's hilarious, and he'd be a very fun dinner guest, but I think the joy Mim would get from hanging out with Jack Black for a night would be incredible. I'm only allowed to ask him a question. It doesn't guarantee that he'll come over, but I'll at least ask him that question. Come over for dinner. Will you come over for dinner?
So what comes to mind is I've got a couple of role models, which is Roger Federer and Matthew McConaughey. And I would ask both of them, they both think about their future as their 10-year-old, a better version of themselves. And Matthew McConaughey's Oscar speech was his role model is his 10-year-older self, right? To always think about yourself 10 years later and the bigger, better version of you. So I would say to both of them, who are you in 10 years' time? And how do you want to feel in 10 years' time? I would love to know those answers.
The one person that keeps coming back to mind, and if I ever meet her again, she's going to, I don't know, if she ever listens to anything I ever say about her, and then I meet her again, she's going to be like, oh, there's that crazy girl who's obsessed with me. I love Jo Malone. She is just like such an incredible woman. And I always say this on any podcast I go on where they ask me a question like this or something to do, I don't know, something about someone that inspires me. She has had the most extraordinary life full of like trials and tribulations, and I don't think many people know unless you're inspired by her. So definitely read her book, but she also does tell her story a lot more succinctly on other people's podcasts. But she has had the most extraordinary life, and she exited Jo Malone when she was recovering from breast cancer and lost her incredible sense of smell. And she then had like a non-compete for however long, and that's when she started up Jo Loves. And she said, and she always says this on podcasts as well, but she said, never make a life-changing decision on a bad day. And I think that's a piece of advice that has really stuck with me. So what question would I ask Jo Malone? Well, I have actually met Jo Malone, and let me tell you, I don't get starstruck, and I saw her and I went up to her, and I don't know what came out of my mouth. It was like, I have a business. She was like, oh, that's great. What do you do? And I was like, I help people with their social media, because that's what I did at the time. And I didn't quite get my words out and comprehend it then. But had I asked her what I wanted to ask her at the time, I would have said, what is the magic potion for success? I think is what I would have asked her, because Jo Loves now is obviously very, very successful in its own right. Jo Malone is very, very successful in its own right. And I can unpick her story and understand why she was so successful. But I just think it would be really interesting to hear from her what factors she really truly believes contributed to her success.
I think it would probably be Neil Finn. He's one of my favourite singer-songwriters. As far as any sort of artist goes, to me, one of his skill sets is his lyrical content and the picturescape that paints in my brain when listening to his lyrics. And I would probably want to ask where the inspiration for a lot of his lyrics come from. And it couldn't just be one question. It would be tens of, it would, So, because I think when I write a song, my songwriting comes from a place of, a lot of times, it's a cathartic process for me. But for him, I feel it's a far different creative process, one that I've never been able to fully grasp, and I would love to know where that comes from, So there you go. It would be Neil Finn. Neil, if you're listening, get in touch.
That one's an easy one for me. It'd be Mum, for sure. And it literally would be, how am I doing? Like, are you happy with what's going on? Because she unfortunately left us when I was like 15 or something. And I'm like 30, 36 going on 37 now. So all of the cool stuff you would argue that, I'm doing now, she, can see, can't see or whatever. So I kind of check into that. That would be it. Because that's what fuels me most of the time. It's kind of like making sure what I'm doing is standing right by, family and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so it would be Karen Brady. So in my eyes, she is a really successful businesswoman, but she is also a mother as well. So I'd love to have a conversation with her all around how she juggles it all. How does she switch from being in the boardroom 1 minute to dealing with children and school bake sales and lost PE jumpers the next? Do you know what I mean? Because it does take it's draining trying to be everything to everybody all at once and run a business. So just really how she juggles it, if she's got any tips or if she's got any techniques that she uses so that she can be present when she is a mum and present when she is in the boardroom or dealing with, the corporate world.
I have two female icons. The first one always is more obvious to people, which was Audrey Hepburn. I just thought she was just incredible. I loved her, just the whole demeanor of her and how she came across, her style, obviously, but that little bit of naivety that came across, but actually she was an incredibly strong lady and did some phenomenal things. And that links me to my second one, who is my guilty pleasure. I am a huge Dolly Parton fan. And where I live in Nottingham, unfortunately, there was Dolly came to Nottingham and I had no idea, and I hadn't got tickets. And I literally for years have just think that was my missed opportunity. And I would be there's so many questions I'd want to ask Dolly Parton, but the first would be just picking her brains a little bit on as a phenomenal business person. I mean, isn't she incredible? Runs the most incredible business. She's hugely talented, but yet she's so open as to her, personal life challenges and everything that 5 minutes with her would never be enough at all.
Now, I would like Richard Branson as one of our podcast guests.
We're visioning it.
We're visioning Richard Branson. But I mean, he is a bit busy. I'd have loads I could actually ask him on a business sense and such. It would be fascinating to hear.
We're saying Richard Branson.
I'll go Richard Branson
okay,
then, sorry.
What would you ask him?
Well, probably just initially, it would be if I could come to Necker Island.
That would be a question.
Initially, because then once I'm on Necker Island,
that's like
I can ask him more questions.
Yeah, that's like, if you rub a lamp and there's a magic genie, what's your first wish?
Yeah.
Is for more wishes.
Yes, exactly. It would be something like that.
And then you just corner him on the island and ask him 1,000 questions.
And who doesn't love a tropical island? So then ask all about the island and building on an island and living on an island and why did you buy the island?
Well, maybe you can ask him that when he's on the podcast next year.
I have thought about this for days. It has plagued me. I've asked friends and family, I'm like, what would you answer this? What would you do? And I think I'll just be completely honest with my first instinct here. The person that I would ask is Dale Carnegie. And what I would ask him is, how would you apply your principles to the digital day and age? So Dale Carnegie taught us a very specific way of speaking with people and a mannerism and manners and how to handle people with grace and aplomb and be able to take it from the boardroom to the dinner table. So I think in this digital world, we don't talk to each other anymore. We're first to be snippy or snipe back. It's taught us to be judgmental. Sure, it's connected us to a huge audience and people from all over the world, but we don't necessarily speak to each other anymore, and certainly not with the grace that I think is probably due to our average human being, our fellow human being. So you never know if you're in the grocery store and the person that's so nice to you to hand you that loaf of bread that you can't reach, is that the same person that said oh my gosh, I would never buy that outfit that they're selling on, Facebook Marketplace or whatever, So I just find it interesting. And that's who I would ask. I would definitely ask Dale Carnegie, how do you bridge the gap between the world in which we had to be face-to-face and communicate into the digital world. And I think that his principles still hold true. And I think they're great. I think we still have to show a genuine interest in each other. We still have to be respectful. We still have to give honest appreciation. We still really should probably avoid criticism and condemnation. And I think that's the one thing that we do to an extreme now is that we criticize so quickly. And I think that was one of his principles, is just to take that down a notch, and really kind of be empathetic first. Avoid arguing. There's no need. Maybe we just have a conversation and we understand in more of a debate format rather than an argument. It shouldn't be an attack on someone or sully their soul. We should just be able to talk it through, and admit when you're wrong. I think that people often on social media in the digital world, they're just stalwart and they think that they're right. And maybe in their head and in their life, they are right, but it doesn't mean that it's the same for everybody else.
I think it'd definitely be my mum. I would kind of ask her every question and I would be a 5-year-old again and ask her what her favorite ice cream was, and as an adult, I I would love to know those kind of small kind of questions about her as a person, but I would also love to just sit and chat about being a mum and just how hard it is with a toddler.
So I pondered on this question a lot because there's two women that I would want to ask the same question to. So, and they're both dead, but I would want to ask both Coco Chanel and Madame Clicquot what gave them the grit and determination to keep doing what they were doing in a world where it really wasn't the norm. Like, we talk now about doing things that isn't the norm and breaking glass ceilings and doing things differently, and yay to women doing business, but they were doing things when, like, women were just not allowed to have businesses and do their own thing. Like, how did you have the energy and grit and determination to do that? Like, who was around you? Who was supporting that? Like, who was your cheer squad in that would be my question. Like, how do you do it? I just love it. I just would love to have them at a dinner party and just have a conversation. There's people nowadays, I go, yeah, I'd love to chat, but, with the art of podcasting and books and memoirs, all the questions you would ask someone have or possibly already been asked or already around if you find them in the right spots. So definitely be questions of someone that isn't here.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on today's guests. And if really good conversations are your thing, hit subscribe and join us next time for more business journeys, insights and banter.